Hi everyone, I'm Joanna Penn from thecreativepenn.com and I'm here today with CJ Lyons for the Indie Author Fringe 2016 for the Alliance of Independent Authors. So welcome CJ.
Hi, thanks for having me, Joanna.
Well, today's a bit different. We are going to have a discussion around when is the right time to go full time as a writer. So we'll come to that in a minute, but just an introduction in case people don't know who we are and why should they. CJ Lyons is the award-winning and New York Times bestselling author of 30 novels, which he describes as thrillers with heart. And I'm a USA Today bestselling author of thrillers under JF Penn, and I also write best-selling non-fiction for authors. So let's get into it. So I left my day job pretty much 5 years ago now in September 2011 to become a full-time author entrepreneur, and we'll come back to me in a minute. But CJ, tell us a bit about your story. When did you leave your day job to become a writer? What year was it, and why did you make that decision?
Well, I actually left my day job in 2006. So 10 years I've been free.
Wow.
I was a pediatric ER doctor and then a community pediatrician. And when you're a pediatrician, uh, even working part-time is 40 to 50 hours a week. So it's pretty much no matter what you do, a full-time job. I got my first publishing contract and began to think of publishing as a career in 2004. And I actually had two contracts by the end of that year. And I realized as I was working with my New York City publisher that it's a lot of work. And how was I going to give 120% to my patients and 120% to this new dream come true? Because, who wouldn't want to be a writer? So I decided in 2004 that I was going to pursue writing as a full-time career. And I had started then, so this was about 2 years before I left my day job, planning ahead, especially finances. I'm single, so I have no one to rely on as a safety net. I also help support most of my extended family. So I needed to make certain that finances were not going to be a critical issue. For other people, it might be different things. It might be time management, it might be family needs, but for me, I really had to get my financial world in order. So I started 2 years ahead of time, saving, looking at my expenditures. I actually, when I left my day job, I moved 1,000 miles away because I thought, I'm never going to get a mortgage as a writer. So I thought I'd better figure out where I wanted to live and spend, a good chunk of the rest of my life. So I basically moved to paradise. So I live at the beach now. And so I did a lot of planning on that avenue. What I didn't do a lot of planning on, and it was fortuitous that I actually still have a career, was learning about the actual publishing business. I thought that was a job of the publishers. And you know this story, and maybe other people have already heard it. When I moved, the book that was due to come out in 2006, which was going to be my dream debut thriller, hardcover, the whole 9 yards, the publisher canceled it 90 days before publication date because of cover art issues, something I had no control over. So suddenly I had quit my day job. I was 1,000 miles away from home with no job, unemployed, and no publishing contract. But I kept writing. I dove into learning everything I could about the business because I refused to be in that position of powerlessness again. And that's when I realized no matter who I was partnering with as a publisher, I was CEO of Me Incorporated. Although I wasn't incorporated then, of course, but I tried to take that kind of professional attitude. And luckily, by the end of the year, I had another publishing contract. Berkeley Jove came to me with a wonderful publisher there that wanted to work with me, and I had gotten the rights back, and so I had all my ducks in a row. And I considered the money that I lived on during those 6 months of being unemployed and out of contract kind of, taking a loan from that safety net of savings that I had built up. And then the first thing I did when I got the new publishing contract was I paid that back. So that's kind of been my financial philosophy as, a freelancer, creative entrepreneur, is that I always pay myself a year ahead of time. So no matter what happens, I have at least a year of freedom in the bank to, recuperate, to regroup, to replan, to do whatever I need. And for me, psychologically, that has been so freeing to allow me to focus on the creative aspects.
So, yeah, it was great to hear your story, and you had a couple of years of preparation there, and so did I. I left my day job in 2011, as I said, but I started thinking about it in 2008, and I started writing on the side, building my website on the side. We also, like you said about financial planning, we downsized. That was the really big thing, and I think this is something everyone should think about. We went from a 4-bedroom house to a 1-bedroom flat. We sold a lot of stuff just to really clear our debt, so I didn't have the financial overheads, because I was the main wage earner at the time, but I was so miserable in my job. Unlike you who loved your job, I was really miserable. So I said to my husband, look, I want to give this a go for a year. If it doesn't work, I'll go back to my day job. I also saved, I had 6 months money saved, so not a couple of years like you did, but my husband was working too. And I also started out by going part-time at work. So I only went full-time as a author entrepreneur once I had spent 3 years working 4 days a week. So I built up a whole load of stuff on the side. And we can come back to sort of other preparations, but I guess just sort of coming back to the motivation, how did I know it was the right time? I think for me, it was, I was really over my job. Like, I was crying at work. I hated it. And I wanted to try being a writer. I really enjoyed it. But also I had these other things going on, speaking and the website and stuff, which we'll come back to. So I want to ask you, how did you know it was the right time? Yes, you had these contracts, but who knows? And you enjoyed your job, didn't you? So how did you make that kind of mental final decision?
Well, it was hard because I've been a writer all my life. So the actual being able to finish writing a book was no big deal to me. I mean, I wrote my first novel when I was 15, which luckily no one will ever read. But, I wrote 2 novels in medical school, despite the onerous hours, that entails. So I knew I could finish a book. My thing was, though, I didn't know I could finish a book and get paid for it and turn it into a career until about 2003, when several published friends of mine, we had been swapping manuscripts and had met at a conference. And they both separately kind of hounded me into, really pursuing publication. And I knew a lot of, physicians kind of naturally become storytellers, even farther back than Robin Cook or Michael Crichton. I mean, you can go, all the way back, to, ancient Greeks, tons of physician storytellers. So I had that tradition behind me that it was possible. The real leap of faith, though, was after I got the contracts and I had to make that decision, because I had already tried cutting back to part-time, but that was still, like I said, 40 to 50 hours a week, and, trying to juggle doing both. And I just, as much as I loved my work, I was so intrigued by this idea of challenging myself and taking on this new career. And so it was a real leap of faith. It was a real leap of faith. And I struggled with making that decision for several months before I finally did it. And I didn't even tell anyone I had made the decision until I actually turned in my notice to the guys at my job. So, and they kind of thought I was a little crazy. And they were like, "Do you want to take your time? Maybe talk to a professional?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "No, I really think I can do it." The good thing about medicine, and I think a lot of careers maybe are like this, is that as long as you keep up with it, you can, in the short term, take a little sabbatical and still be able to get back into it. I mean, it's tougher in medicine because things change so quickly. You have to really keep up to date. But, I did keep all my credentials for the first couple years. And then when I realized, I'm not going back, I let them go ahead and expire. But it's a tough decision. I mean, it's really hard and it's so individual. Only you can decide really why you're doing this and are you going to be able to achieve your goals, and that kind of thinking is really difficult for a lot of people, because especially for writers, a lot of times our goals are, can I just finish this book or finish this class or story or whatever I'm working on. And we don't always think about, well, what comes next, and why am I driven to do this, and can I really do this as a fulfilling career, both financially and artistically. It's a real juggling act.
Yeah, and it's interesting they're talking about, as you say, the sort of the pressure that comes from family is a really big one. Like my mom and my mother-in-law are kind of like, well, but you have this responsible job, and you're in your mid-30s. Why are you downsizing? Why are you renting and selling your house? And like this all seems very risky, and of course we believe life's too short to do stuff that you're miserable with. But I was thinking there about security and then and that pressure, the pressure of, oh my goodness, now I have to write a book that earns me money, as opposed to, say, people who love writing poetry or people who love writing literary fiction or, some of these other types of books. So I think we've got to address this creative versus commercial aspect, because it's just not realistic to quit your job and make a living writing poetry or even literary fiction. So this week as we talk, well, actually it was last week, there was an article that came out that said, I released a critically acclaimed novel and now I'm working as a postal worker. This kind of traditional publishing is not all it's cracked up to be. You can write a book that might be critically acclaimed and doesn't make you any money. So I write nonfiction, I write thrillers, I write and I have other forms of income, again, which we will promise to come back to. But what are your thoughts on the types of books that people can write in order to make a living, but also on trad versus indie? Because when you started out, you were traditional, but you've also adjusted to the market with your indie books. So yeah, comment on genre and trad versus indie.
I think there's a couple things to look at here. And a lot of them are, again, people have to be very honest with themselves and do the prep work. You wouldn't expect a brain surgeon to walk in on his first day of medical school and be able to do brain surgery. You wouldn't expect a chef to be able to prepare, a wonderful souffle when he never even learned, how to crack an egg. So you have to do that work up front and really understand what it is that you're wanting to write, not just what you're writing. I have heard so many stories from people that are just writing what they think will sell, and they aren't really writing what's in their heart and what they want to keep writing. So they get very frustrated very quickly. So you have to look at that. You have to look at what the size of your audience is. How are you going to reach them? How are you going to meet those artistic needs? Because a lot of people also, especially extroverts, they quit the day job and they're home alone and they can't write because they don't realize they actually need people around them. Those are often the artists that end up in Starbucks, working away at the computer because they need that buzz of the noise and the people around them. I'm a hermit by nature. So for me, leaving the hustle and bustle of the ER and all that chaos and retreating into my solitude to write was heaven. So that really wasn't a problem for me, but you have to understand yourself to see if that is going to be a problem. The other thing you touched upon, I don't think it's so much about genre, because I have seen some people have literary successes, by publishing stories that, aren't quite genre niche publishing. They're more women's fiction or literary fiction. But here's the trick. They knew their audience. They had a plan to reach them, whether they were doing it themselves or hiring someone to help them with that. And they were writing more than one book a year. And that's the real trick, is that I really think, and this is the advice I give to anyone just starting out, don't even think about doing it till you have at least 3 completed and edited books targeted to the same audience. And that's the real key. I'm not talking about an erotic romance and inspirational treatise and, a YA. I'm talking about 3 stories targeted to your audience before you start to think about self-publishing those, because if you hit that right chord with your readers, they're going to want more, but they're not going to wait. And you can't build a career by making people wait. Think it out ahead of time and have a plan, which for a lot of us, we don't want to do that. We want to be spontaneous, and we finish the book and, I just want to hit click and publish it. Or I want to submit it to New York City and get that seal of approval. So it's really important that you kind of educate yourself, not just on how publishing works, both self-publishing and traditional publishing, but how you work, and how you can get the work done. And I think that maybe is, and it's funny because you think, well, I'm right here. I can talk to myself and figure this out. But that's often our biggest stumbling block, is figuring out what we need and why we're doing this and what we want out of it, rather than, what the rest of the world is needing, or, how we can meet those needs and make some money from it, make a living at it.
So just coming back on the traditional publishing versus indie. So, I'm mostly an indie author. I have a couple of tiny deals, but most of my income is from indie published books. Now, what's great about the money that comes from indie is that it comes every month. So we get paid by Amazon, and we also, and Kobo and iBooks and Drafter Digital and everyone else, every month. So as we record this, it's the end of the month, and all the money just arrived in my bank account. And we love counting our money. It's fun. But I have 20 books, you have 30 plus books, we have a lot of books, so there's some money coming in. But what I like about it is that I know how much is coming in. So if people don't know this, 60 days before, so I know how much money is going to come into my bank account, so I can do a cash flow forecast. And I mean, pretty much, I think every month, Barnes & Noble has missed a couple, I believe. But mostly people pay, we're paid on time at the end of the month, and we know how much it's going to be. Now, that might be a smaller amount every month for a longer period, whereas traditional publishing is a spike income, and you might not know when the hell it's going to come, and it might not reconcile to anything. Would that be true?
And this is an argument I have quite often with friends of mine that are traditionally published and just flat out refuse to ever consider self-publishing. Is, as much as they love the idea of getting paid every month, and I am very honest with them. I say, look, I actually make more in a month with my self-published books than I do in a year from my traditionally published books. And that even includes years when I get paid my advances. Because when you're going with a traditional publishing, now this is how it is with New York City publishing. It's a little different with the foreign markets. I've been published now in 14 different countries. So each one's a little different. But most people are looking towards New York City or London when they're thinking of big traditional deals. So the way it works for New York City is that if you're getting at all a significant advance, which is the money they're paying you ahead of time, but you still have to pay that back. You have to earn it out. So you're not going to make any extra money until you sell enough copies to make back that advance for them. And often that advance is divided, depending on how big it is, into up to 3 to 4 different segments of time. So if I sold a book to New York City today, and I signed a contract today, in about 6 weeks I would get the first payment, which would be about, usually my contracts are big enough that they usually want to pay them out over at least 3 installments. So that would be a third of the advance. When I turned in the manuscript and it's accepted, so that's, I turned it in on time. I have never worked with an editor that has responded on time, even though that's in the contract, that they have to respond within so many days. It has never happened. And I've had 14 books published from major New York City publishers. So they just work on a different time frame. That's just life. in the big leagues. That's just how it works. So you can't plan on it. So once they accept the manuscript, then you get a payment. And then on publication date, you'll get a payment. Well, if I turned in a book, if I signed the contract today, if I turned in the book in a month, I still may not have a pub date till 2018 in New York City. So you can't say, oh, I got $150,000 advance. That means I may get $150,000 this year to live on. You've got to divide that up, and it's going to be paid out over several years. And then you might not make another dime for your entire life. You may not see another dime from that book unless you kept sub-rights and, sold those out, or, until you sell through, which means you have to pay that advance back. And then you'll start getting royalty checks. And New York City publishers right now, they pay twice a year. I just got royalty checks from Random House, and so it's end of September, and those royalty checks were paying money from books sold between December 2015 and June 2016.
Yeah, and it's funny, I just got one here on my desk from my German publisher, and it's wrong. And I'm like, okay, there we go. This happens every 6 months. So, and I won't get that money until that's sorted out. So the reason why we're talking about this is because if you get a 6-figure deal today from a publisher, don't give up your day job. That's basically what we're saying. Because if you take out your agent's percentage
first, to do the math first.
Yeah, do the math first. But basically, take out your agent's 15%, take out the money for tax. We always have to remember to pay our taxes. And then, like you say, if it's split over the next 3 years, for example, you are left with not the very much money. So let's talk about multiple streams of income. So I did not give up my job and in fact still I call myself an author entrepreneur, because although I do make a 6-figure income from book sales, I also make money from other things. So I sell online courses. I'm a professional speaker. I also have affiliate links, which are commission payments for other things that I sell. These are normal kind of online business things. And I have, as well as JF Penn, I have Joanna Penn writing nonfiction, and I have thecreativepenn.com, which generates money. And like I'm flying off to America next week to speak speak at a conference. And so I have these multiple streams of income, and I can't even count them now. I probably have 20 plus different forms of money coming in different days of the month, and I've built that up over years. So when I left my job in 2011, I was already making a couple of $1,000s a month from other things. So what are the other multiple streams of income?
Here's the thing, Joanna, you were able to do that because you got in very early and you had an expertise that was valuable for people to pay you for that nonfiction side of things. There's going to have something like that. I was quite fortuitous that since I kind of figured out a lot of the things, and it's funny, it's things that people are still creating courses on now. Like in 2009, I was giving away free books with newsletter signups, and now there's people that teach that. So there's always things that people want to learn and they'll pay to learn it. And I think as long as you are, giving good value for that money, it's an excellent income stream if you have the time for it.
But writers as teachers that's always been a business model, hasn't it?
That's what I'm saying. And if you're good at that and you have the time where it doesn't interfere with your creative schedule or your family life or, the other things that take that time away, I think that's really a great way to go. And there's some excellent resources on learning how to do that and learning how to put together what they call passive streams of incomes, like the online classes that you're not teaching live, so you only have to create them once and then they produce revenue. A lot of people, though, they don't feel comfortable with that. They don't have those kind of resources. So I would advise, if you're going to be writing full time, look at the alternative income streams that you can expect as a regular fiction author, which means take advantage of your sub-rights. That includes, obviously the pie in the sky is the TV or movie deal, but quite a number of indie authors have gotten that. I think both of us right now have movie agents and film agents shopping our particular books and series out there. Look at your audio rights. Definitely use those. Audio's growing. You've done several podcasts on this. It's takes an investment up front, but it's well worth it. I have yet to have any audiobook that I've done, and I hire some of the best narrators out there, so it does cost a pretty penny up front to invest in, but every single one has earned back that investment within several months. So definitely look at your audio rights. Foreign rights. For a while there, I was making more off of my foreign sales than I was off of my U.S. sales. So, you really have to look at those foreign rights. That was way back in the dark ages when Amazon was only paying 35% royalties. Now that they're 70, that's no longer the case. But yeah, there's a definitely rich and growing emerging foreign markets, global markets out there. So, there are ways to subsidize it. So it's not just, oh, I write this book, I sell only this book. Print as well. A lot of people forget about print, but, it's pretty easy and not very expensive to get your book formatted into print if you've created the ebook. So there's a lot of venues out there. I think the problem with a lot of them, though, is that you don't know how much money you will make. So it's hard to plan ahead, and that's where people get jittery because they're like, okay, it's going to cost me $5,000 to make an audiobook. I don't know if I'm going to make that back or when I'll make that back or how much money I'll make on that project after I make it back. And people get really concerned then because we don't like the unknown. We don't like the uncertainty of it.
Mm. And I think though, what the point I want to make is that's much easier. What we're talking about there with rights is much easier when you have a number of books. But what we're talking about here is people who might, who are where I was in 2011 or where you were back in 2006. So I think, and I'm in a forum with a whole load of UK writers who, most of them, like 90% of them, are considered full-time writers because that's their main income stream, but they pretty much all have other income streams. So freelance writing, I think, is a really big one, people who write articles, but a lot of them have part-time teaching roles on creative writing, like physically teaching creative writing at universities or classes. And so I think what I want to do is just take away any guilt or worry that people have. Like, if you give up your job to be a writer, you can be a writer something else, a writer teacher or a writer freelance writer, or you don't. Yeah, and I think this is the thing. There's a lot of pressure that is like, well, you should be making all your money from this particular thing. But the reality, yeah, exactly. But I think you feel that. I've felt that in some of the forums. It's like, oh, well, you're not as, you're not a proper writer because 100% of your income is not from fiction, for example. And exactly, we don't agree with that. So what I think the way to consider it for the listeners is thinking about a portfolio career. It's, having all these different income streams. And hey, if you need to do some freelance writing to pay the rent, then do that while you work on your magnum opus, epic fantasy. So do that.
When I was at that period where I was, my first publishing contract had suddenly gotten canceled. I had no, I was unemployed, aspects of a new contract at the time. I did some freelance medical writing. I also did some developmental editing. There's a lot of ways to earn money as a creative, whether you're turning it to, copywriting and nonfiction or focusing only on the fiction or going with teaching. The income streams are out there. To me, the biggest challenge, though, was the time management. Because I considered myself a novelist, a fiction writer. And I didn't want to walk away from my fiction and get so involved in these other businesses just to get a paycheck. Isn't that the same as, going back to my day job? Mm. So for me, the biggest thing was the time management, the energy management. As an introvert, I get drained very easily. It's hard for me to keep my creative focus if I'm trying to divide it in too many directions. So that's me knowing myself and knowing what I needed in order to focus on the real career, which for me was writing the fiction.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. So let's just talk a bit more about the psychological things, the mindset shift, and as you mentioned, like I'm an introvert too. We're both introverts, and yet in that first year, one of the things that really surprised me was cabin fever. Was being in my house. Now I do like today. I got up this morning and I go to a co-working space. Now I rent my own little room, so I'm not in the open plan office, but I'm still getting out my house. I'm going to a cafe. I'm walking. I'm out in the fresh air. I'm drinking my coffee at the coffee shop, and then I go and I do my writing, and then I often then walk to the next coffee shop, and I will. Yeah, I know, but I try and get out my house because and
You are so much better at that than I am, though. I mean, I'm a hermit, and when I get up and I'm in the zone, I mean, it's hard to get me out of my chair, much less out of the house. So for me, I have to set up like alarms on my computer, get up and walk for 5 minutes, go get on the exercise bike. Tried to start to do when I'm doing things that aren't the actual words on the page writing, but like editing, revising things, research, answering emails. I do try to do that while exercising if I can, whether it's on an exercise bike or what have you. Definitely get out and walk. The sunshine, the fresh air, this is the doctor and me talking now. The rhythmic movement are all very important for creativity. But if you're, a real introvert, sometimes it's hard to get yourself to do that. So you need to know yourself and set yourself up for success, even if it means just having a friend give you a call or sending you a text saying, did you go outside in the sun and play today? Whatever you need.
Yeah, and I think what became very important for me was like my husband would come home and he would go and I would just like talk at him because I hadn't, there was this, even in the first year, it was literally like, why am I just spending all my time alone? So the other thing is to grow a community. And I think it needs to be people in physical life as well as online. So, we met a number of years ago online. We've since met in person. But some of my best friends now in real life, in physical life, are people I met online. So, and they are not people I knew before in my old life. So these are new friends that I've made since I've been a full-time author. And I think this is so important to people. Now, you can't just go out and suddenly make friends, but you literally have to start friend dating, I've found, in the way that you did when you started a new job. You actually have to make an effort to try and meet people because you need that support. You can't, if you're on your own or if you have a partner, they can't be everything in your life. You have to find a community. And so we're doing this interview on behalf of the Alliance of Independent Authors, and that's a great place to start. Loads of business-minded indies and creative people doing things differently.
And they're international, so you can find someone, who maybe doesn't live close to you in person, but, at least understands what you're going through no matter where you live. That's what I like about Allies is its global, kind of reach. But I think you're right, though. The isolationism can be really hard for a lot of people to handle. I'm 10 years into this and I still struggle with that because it is so much easier, especially when I'm on deadline, because I can use that as an easy excuse to, not go out to like book club or, have lunch with a friend or something. So, I try to make it a point to at least once a week have something that's social on my calendar. Because otherwise, I really would be a hermit and I'd, have 20 cats or something to talk to.
Okay, so I guess we're winding up a bit now. Are there any other sort of things that you think about? I mean, probably one big thing to say is you mentioned incorporation earlier. You don't need to incorporate or have a limited company in Britain in order to do this full time. Like you can leave your job without having a business in place. But what you do need is an understanding of income and expenses and a way to pay your bills. So that's important.
I would suggest go one step further. What I wish I had when I started out, because I did all this prep work on my own and, I've always been very frugal. So the downsizing and all that was easy. I wish I had had a financial advisor, though, that understood the tax differences when you go freelance. Here in the States, we have an extra 15% self-employment tax. Thank you very much. Mm-hmm. Plus, we have, health insurance issues, things like that other countries may not have to deal with. We also have this thing called estimated taxes, that when you're self-employed, you have to pay those quarterly based on an estimate of what your income is. Well, as a writer, I have no clue my income's going to be. So I wish I had someone that understood all these little details that were a little bit beyond me at the time and helped me plan ahead and helped me kind of realize, okay, I've got that part taken care of. I know what needs to be done. I have someone I can ask for help if I need to. Now I can go focus on the work. Instead of me trying to teach myself along the way. So I would advise anyone, especially if you're married and have a partner, and it's both of you kind of making that leap of faith based on your creative career. Sit down with someone and really look at the numbers, and someone that can be objective and give you good, solid, honest advice, because I think that might help you formulate a plan and feel more comfortable in whatever you decide.
Yeah, but in saying that, we don't want to scare people off. I mean, for
saying take that additional step, so you'll feel more comfortable once you make your decision. Because one of the things that I've seen so many times happen to other people is their partners get so invested in their creative career that if they don't make huge money right away and sell a boatload of books right away, they kind of start to withdraw and get disappointed because they were thinking of it like, writers in the movie or on TV, like Castle. It's like, oh yeah, I just wrote a book, so I made $1 million. Like, no.
That does not happen.
But people don't realize that, they're programmed and conditioned to think that, well, if you're quitting your day job to be a writer, you're going to be a New York Times bestseller and sell 1 million books and go to book signings and have 1,000 people lined up to get your autograph. I just realized, no, it's showing up every day and typing something on the keyboard. So I think just taking that extra time to get that comfort zone established, both psychologically and financially, just takes a lot of the pressure off of your creative soul so that you can be a little more free to explore creative options.
Yeah, and what I also want to come back to that kind of guilt aspect, which, I hear a lot of people at the moment go, do you know what? I'm going to go back to my day job. I'm just not making it. And it's so important to say right now, that's completely fine. Like, let's not be romantic about where our money comes from or how we pay the bills. You are a writer if you're writing books and you're putting them out there. So I guess we need to finish up. But I guess just one more personal note, and then I'll just hand back to you to say whether it's worth it. I've been doing this now for 5 years. I'm so happy to be an author entrepreneur. This is definitely the life that I was meant to live. I'm creatively fulfilled. I'm now making more money than I was when I had a day job, but it's taken 5 years full time to get back up to that. And I definitely took a big drop at the beginning. So I guess what I'm saying is you can be creatively and financially successful, but you have to sort all this stuff out along the way and run a business as well as be a creative person. So why don't you also just finish up by saying, is it worth it? Have the 10 years been worth it?
Hell yes. I mean, I left a career that for a small town girl in Pennsylvania, even going to college, much less medical school, was a huge dream come true. And then to be able to leave such a fulfilling career in medicine and turn it to an equally fulfilling career as an author and touching so many more lives than I ever could as a doctor. So for me, it's not just the creative fulfillment, it's not just the finances, it's the ability to really be touching that audience. I mean, when you get that first fan mail that makes you cry because you changed a reader's life, I mean, that's worth everything. That's priceless. So absolutely. I would never turn anyone away from this career. I would just say before you do it full time and burn your bridges, just, step back and think, because I want you to have a parachute. I want you to have that soft landing so that you can hit the ground running and go off and write all those wonderful books that you need to write and get out into the world.
Yeah, so thank you everyone for watching this. This has been the Indie Author Fringe in Frankfurt Book Fair, October 2016. And there is a worksheet for you to download that has a whole load of questions and a whole load of bullet points, which will help you think about all the different things we've talked about and a whole load more. It's a hell of a worksheet, and both CJ and I have worked on this, so we've put everything in there. The Alliance of Independent Authors obviously has a load of help as to how you can make different forms of income, and you can find me at thecreativepen.com, and I have a book, Business for Authors, as well, which goes into this. And CJ, do you want to give out your website as well?
Yes, I'm at cjlyons.net, but it's really only fiction books. I don't have any website for authors anymore.
The Alliance of Independent Authors website is allianceindependentauthors.org, or you can go to selfpublishingadvice.org, which is also the blog. So, yes, thank you so much, CJ, for your time. That was fantastic.
Thanks again, Joanna.